Good afternoon, everybody. I see Lwazi is here. I've muted one. I'm just going to allow Lwazi to be unmuted. Lwazi, can... Oh, great.
I can hear you.
Great. How are you, sir?
I can hear you at this point.
Good.
Can you hear me?
Everybody, Lwazi is here. I've muted one. I'm just going to allow Lwazi. I just need to mute the YouTube one. Lwazi, oh, great.
I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Technology was just batting me there for one more minute. Welcome everyone on this conversation with Lwazi Zakumba, a gentleman that was born and bred in Port Elizabeth, which is now called Gqeberha. We just call it GQ for, just to help all the clicks. He attended Emafini Primary School, Woodland Park Primary School before entering Alexander Road High School, which all of them are here in Port Elizabeth. He then pursued a PSc and did computer science and mathematics and PGCE in FET and Senior Phase Mathematics. Started teaching in Alexander as well, a school that he studied from, which is good. And he did math and ICT there, and I'm sure the learners still remember him. And so after that, Lwazi went on to do his honors and masters in math education, mathematics education, and I do think it was Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University at the time, which is now Nelson Mandela University. And so he got an opportunity to head the math literacy department and marked some matric scripts. I suppose he will tell us about that, how fun was that job. And Lwazi has not done his PhD yet, and he was about to do PhD before he left for an opportunity in China. And that question of a PhD, I thought I'm going to bring it up maybe a little bit later, because I think this is one thing that is lingering, especially when you are at this level of your professional work. And a lot of academics, I know that it's just a pain very far in the body. And then Lwazi has been working as a teacher, teaching maths for the last 16 years. And in the last 16 years, he's been teaching 3 different curriculums, which is quite interesting, how he integrates all of that and what he learns from it. And he has his family, Unwabisa, and the children. I think there's 2, but you'll actually update me. It's been a while since we've had a conversation, Lwazi. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm well. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you quite well, yes.
All right. Good, Odom, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. I know you'll probably ask me how I'm doing. I'm asking you, you are the guest. Certain things just don't change. Honestly, you have a nice red bow tie. Show us.
Can I say? It's
yes.
almost
You really
a special
look
occasion.
And it's the time now. It's 7 minutes past 3 p.m. in the afternoon, but you are like 7 minutes past 9.
9, yeah, so it's almost 10 past 9 p.m. in the evening. So I'm hiding in the room and the kids are sleeping in their rooms, and I've closed the door so that I don't wake up the kids are already sleeping. So yeah, it's been a very eventful day. It was, and I will tell you a little bit later, but it's my son's birthday today. So we had, I would have loved to, maybe I can add a few pictures on my PPT, just to get a picture of the number of people that were here. So I'll try to see if I can add some things on this PPT quickly. Let me first greet everyone that's there. Pardon?
Let me just say that because of the time that you're having this, a lot of people did signal that they'll rather watch it a little bit later.
Okay.
So that, yeah, because they are still, some are still at work, others on their way from work. So
No
it's
problem.
because of the time, but I'm sure people will catch up. I like the fact that we have it on YouTube as well, currently playing live. So people will catch up. I can see some common friends. I'm not going to allow them to speak now. We're just going to have you to sort of say your piece, and then we're going to have a conversation. I want you to actually have a flow, the way that you have been thinking about this kind of a talk, and just talk to us, brief us, and inform us. I'll also be on mute, and if you need to put your video for connectivity purposes on, if you need to put your video off, I would still think it's fine, but you can actually chat. We will be able to let you know if we can't hear you.
Okay, just give me a second so I can, I'm quickly adding just a little bit of a vibe of what was happening here not so long ago in my household. So while that's loading, let me greet everyone. Hello, Dumelang, Molweni, Ni Hao, Guten Tag, and all those different languages. It is good to.
Let me just say that I was actually rehearsing Ni Hao Ma, Ni Hao Elma. I don't know, I can't remember anymore. I thought I was going to shock you. Nijao Shema, something like that.
But nothing shocks me anymore. I think.
And I was told it was Mendel.
Nothing shocks
and tell
me
in your presentation, before you start, as things are starting to gear up.
Yeah.
Did you eat anything in China that you probably will never tell? Take it over. I'm just amusing
well,
myself.
That's the first question. I'm sure that's a question that will come. Let me just start, and then I'll be glad to answer those questions at a later stage. So with this presentation, Olwam had just asked some time ago. I mean, I hadn't spoken to Olwam really in a long time, and I would get just emails from Black Hat when they were doing anything like, especially the Money Talk, which was quite an interesting thing. I've always, of course, admired the work that they're doing. And so I watched some stuff there, and I watched a few videos from Fruits of Democracy. And I think Ungule also did a video. And so I just thought, wow, this is interesting. And in another one, I think I saw Manlaki, of course, a lot of Money Talk, which is interesting. Just for me and where we're at, and just thinking a whole lot about financial decisions. But maybe that might be a question for later about international teaching. So let me jump straight into things. So I'm gonna share my screen. Unfortunately, the video that I wanted to share is taking a while to load. So might not be ready for our presentation. So let me just share and take you through. There's so many things in front of this, I can't even see.
Take your time, Sim.
Okay, all right. So hello, everyone. So I guess in this particular presentation, my task is simple. It's me simply talking, not that I will do it great justice, about math education. And by math education, really, I'm looking at the tip of the iceberg. Quite a broad, I'll be doing quite a broad view all over math education. And some of you guys might be aware, I'm South African, of course, and I started teaching in South Africa, and I taught for 9 years, and then I moved to international. So this is my journey. This is by no means a comprehensive depth into any of these curriculums I'll be talking about. And I'm not in any way a educational consultant or advisor or anything like that. I am a teacher, first and foremost, that has been blessed and privileged to have taught in, I guess, in 3 great schools that have impacted my teaching philosophy. So for those of you guys who are teachers, especially in the math field, this might be interesting. And for those of you who are parents thinking about where to send your kids or which schools and why, this might be interesting to you. And those of you who just want to know a little bit more or ask a few more questions, this might be of interest to you. So I guess we'll be looking at 4 different things, just me introducing myself. Olam has already done part of that, and then a little bit of my journey. And then we'll be looking at the differences, again, from quite a big, broad perspective, and then some conclusion, and then of course we can ask some questions. So a little bit about me. Olam has already said, Lwazi, married to Nwabisa, I have 2 kids, Ndinawe and Zoe. I'm starting my 7th year in China. Can you believe it? It's been such a long time. And my family joined me some time later. Nwabisa was pregnant when I came over. She was about 7 months pregnant when I left her. And then I went back for Ndinawe's birthday for the October. It's an October break. In fact, it's holiday for Chinese, but it's not for us. So I left China. Within a month, I arrived to go home for the birth of Ndinawe. Saw him for 1 day, came back to China. Was here for 2 months, went back home for Christmas. Came back over New Year's, and I went back over February to then get my family, Nwabisa and Ndinawe then. So they've been here for about 6 years. So this is basically all he knows. Has a background in management. She did a BTech at Nelson Mandela University, and she worked at Kocha ITZ for some time before joining me. She has now transitioned, believe it or not, into teaching as well. And just a little bit about that. It's hard in China to get any job outside of teaching, really, unless you are working for an international company that brings you over. So if you're an accountant or engineer or any professional, most jobs that people end up doing in China is teaching and teaching ESL. And so that one doesn't obviously require any degrees in teaching. You just need a degree in anything. As for my kids, both of them are doing EC, we call it early childhood. Dana is doing its final year. And Zoe has just started her first year of EC. About me and education, again, alluded to it, at WC in PE. I did up to grade 6, and then we moved to Royal Park, and I did grade 7. And I went to Alexander Road High, and I got my matric there. And at tertiary, I studied everything at NNMU, a BSc first, and a PGCE straight after that. Actually, my third year, there was one math course that I failed. And then, so in my fourth year, while I was finishing my degree, I also did my PGCE. That allowed me, so in 4 years, I managed to get both of those. Then I started working at Alex, taught math and math literacy and computers. And then at some time, I did my honors and masters. So how did I get here? I think I saw Marcel somewhere there. Marcel might be aware. The lady in the middle of this picture is Betsy, was Bar, now Duncan. And so the connection is simply that when we're in high school, Betsy and her family were working in South Africa. And Betsy and her sisters went to our school. And so I was friends with Betsy, we are still friends. And after high school, she went back to the US and studied and came to China with her husband and 2 boys. And they heard that I was looking to work internationally at some point. And so she sent me an email through some ladies from church. And then we were in contact, and then I came to China. And so she was the hand that God moved to get me to China. I'm very grateful for that friendship. So that, in essence, is how we got from South Africa to China. It's through her. All right. So I'm checking any of the chats if there are any questions. Nothing there yet. So my journey.
Not at the moment, you can continue.
Okay. So
no, I was saying not at the moment, you can continue.
Okay, thank you, Buti. I got you. All right, so this is my educational journey. So for those of you, like a good teacher, I would say, I'll give you 10 cents for every mistake you notice. So feel free to comment or give it to yourself and tell me later. I will e-wallet all those 10 cents that might accumulate. So local is Lekker, of course. I went to Alex High School, very great school, and really a great opportunity for me or any student to get that type of education. Exposed me to a lot of things, introduced me to some lifelong friends. Some of them are on this chat as we speak. And they offered me an opportunity as I was finishing grade 12, which is a great thing about Alexander Road High, is that if you attend the school and for whatever they like you, they offered me a bursary. And so that was easy. So going to university, even though I was going to do a PGCE, a BSc, then PGCE, we had a great counselor, Dr. McGregor, and so he spoke to me and they offered me the scheme, they call it, so that if I go and study for the number of years I study, I can go back to the school and teach for the same number of years. So it was an easy decision. And further on, I got other bursaries. So, and I mention that because in a Black family, parents will never want their kids to study teaching, especially since my parents were into teaching and most of my aunts and uncles, so they didn't recommend teaching. But because I got funding from school and other bursaries, they didn't have to worry too much about my studies. And so in essence, they didn't really have much of a say. So when I went back to Alex to teach, I taught there for 9.5 years. I taught math lit, and computer studies. They have the 2 levels, programming and studies. I taught mainly high school, of course, grade 10 to 12. And I worked with a few other organizations that offered Saturday math classes, township schools. I did that for some years. And I worked with Psychi as well on their camps for grade 12s. So that was my educational sort of journey in South Africa. Very foundational, very important. And I don't think it was just the right stepping stone for me to step internationally. I don't think if I had not gone and worked in that environment, I don't think I would have been prepared for anything else or would have been willing to step into anything. So now moving on to the international side. My desire, even at university, when I knew that I was going to pursue teaching, my desire was always to go international. To go international simply because I had a sense that there was something more than just whatever South Africa had to offer, or in my small area. And so when I started applying internationally some time before I finished my master's, but the year that I finished, that's when things started heating up. And I was thinking Middle East and I was thinking UK at that point. There were 2 references at school, people that had traveled and come back. And so they were the only people that I knew that had taught overseas and come back. And their stories were okay. They weren't super motivating, but I still knew that I wanted to go and start and work overseas. And especially after the master's, you know, a lot of the professors say, come and do your PhD. And I was really thinking about just moving straight into PhD. But when the international place came, I had to say it's a decision between me going internationally and seeing if I can be exposed to something new, and maybe that can influence the topic that I choose for a PhD. Or I could have, you know, built on what my master's was on. So my professor then just said to me, hey, go overseas and then come back and finish your PhD. So I went to Chingdao. My journey started in Beijing, a school called Chingwah International School. Now, Chingwah International School is affiliated to Tsinghua University, and that university is the #1 university in China. It is, I don't want to say it's I could say it's a UCT of South Africa, but a little bit more because it's overtaken MTI or MIT as the best research university in the world. So that gives you an idea. It's the top of the top of the top of the top Chinese kids that go to Tsinghua University. So if we're talking top 100 students that perform well in our metric exams, take those kids and take them to Tsinghua. So we're talking about the best brains. So I was teaching at a school affiliated with that. So a lot of the professors, they had kids, especially the international professors, and so their kids came to our international school. So that's where I taught for 3 years. There, it was an American school, what they call a progressive, project-based American school, and I'll explain those later when I look at the differences. So after 3 years, we looked at coming back to South Africa because I had said to my wife then that we'd be here for 3 years. And Beijing was very, very tough on her, especially from being a career woman to being a house mom. So there were just many emotional and challenges in Beijing on that aspect. But for me professionally, it was very good. And then the doors in South Africa didn't open at the 2 places I was looking at. And so we moved to Qingdao. Qingdao and Beijing is like moving from Johannesburg. Beijing is like a Johannesburg. It's just 3 times bigger, about 25 million people. Qingdao is like Joburg to PE, you know, very calm, it's coastal. Qingdao is exactly that. It reminds me of home. It's coastal, it's got mountains right here. It's great for a family. And one of the reasons was because there was a colleague of mine that was now working in Qingdao who was a principal. So it was easy to get in because he's already my referee. So it was an easy transition to here. And the other major thing was, of course, while Tsinghua was American Common Core and AP school, I will explain what that means later. Qingdao was an IB school, or is an IB school. And those are important differences. And when I talk a little bit later, it would make sense. Not only is it IB, as an international teacher, you definitely want the IB because most international schools or even some of the top international schools are IB schools. And so to get into a school without IB experience that is willing to allow you to be trained and to grow as an IB teacher is something that you, as an international teacher, you want to grab hold of. And also it was offering a good schooling for my kids, a Montessori program, which is very expensive, even in South African standards. So of course, I don't have to pay for my kids' education here. So I started there 4 years ago. I've just started my 4th year now. All right, so that's my background in terms of schooling. Okay, that's just an overview of me, education and teaching professionally. So now, as we delve deeper, I want to, for those of you who are not in the education field in South Africa, I want to just paint the landscape. Of course, I've been out of the South African landscape for a long time, even though I was pretty involved, especially in my position as the head of a subject. So I had to attend a whole lot of meetings. And yes, I did the matric marking for MathLet, and that forces you to get to know the exams and the structures and just a whole lot about CAPS or what they call the NCS. You have to know it a little bit deeper. So I've been out of it for some time. So if you note anything that you disagree with, that's okay. This is my understanding of it, but I do want to pass on as accurate information as I can. So for those who are watching who are not in the educational space, the South African public schools really follow two streams of the curriculum. You have the NCS, right? The National Senior, the NSC is the National Senior Certificate. That's what the grade 12s, right? The NCS is a whole curriculum, okay, what South Africa is offering. And under the NCS, you can then just do the normal one, which 90% of the schools or 95% of the schools in South Africa do. I'm assuming most of the people who are watching went to a public school in South Africa. However, if you went to a private school in South Africa, private schools in South Africa have the option of doing what they call the IEB, the Independent Examinations Board. And so they still get an NCS certificate, but it will say IEB. So you can just do the normal one, matric exams, or you can do the IEB. And I'm sure whenever it's January, when the results come out, the news are always talking about, okay, let's look at the matric pass rate and let's look at the IEB. And the IEB is normally on the private schools, and the rest of the other public schools would follow the normal NSC exams. So then you have Umalusi. So for both of these, Umalusi is an important council that makes sure that the quality of the exams and the whole curriculum meets whatever standards the NQF sets out. The NQF is the National Qualification Framework. And so all the degrees and everything that South Africa offers has to fit somewhere in, and the NQF really does that and says, okay, this is a level 7, NQF 7, NQF 8. So when you get what degree, I think that's NQF 10 or 11 or whatever the case might be. So when you finish grade 12, you've attained a certain NQF level. And that's what that metric certificate holds. So you can either go the normal one. Now here's an interesting one. The national curriculum statement for grades R to 12 gives expression to the knowledge and skills and values worth learning in South African schools. I've highlighted two things there: South African schools, and I wanted to extend and say South African context. And that's an important one. So our public schools are in essence preparing us to be better citizens in our own country. If you are South African and you go to a South African public school. So the whole curriculum is saying, how can this student be the best possible citizen in this, or contributor in this economy or in this country? Whereas IEB, even though they're independent, they come in and they say, we'll take what you are teaching, and then we'll bring in an element where we want the kids to be trained to think internationally. So then the IEB has an international focus on it, where they say, we don't just want these students to get a matric certificate. We want these matric certificates at least to be equated to another, to other degrees in different countries, especially the UK. And we often compare that to the Cambridge AS levels. Okay, so the IEB is often for mathematics and English, only those two. The IEB math and English is often equated to what a Cambridge AS level is. I'll explain what that is later. So which means if I go to a private school that has IEB, the philosophy of teaching is a little bit different to what maybe we would get in a normal public school. And the whole focus, they try to bring in the whole international field so that the kids can start thinking internationally. And so it's your decision then where to send your child. Okay. All right, I'll switch off my video. So that's quite an important distinction in South Africa. And of course, here's a greater one, the cost. All right, the cost. Yes, South African schools have different quantiles, quantile 1 to quantile 5, where 4 and 5 are school fees paying. But I mean, Alex then was, I don't know, 12,000 a year, 1,000 a month. But if you're going to an IEB school generally, in fact, the top 5 expensive schools in South Africa all follow IEB. So St. John's or Michael House or St. Andrews in Grahamstown, those school fees are looking at about 300,000 a year, including boarding, of course. They all offer IEB. So, and of course, those parents, I think we want our child to have the opportunity to go overseas at some point. Okay, so just checking, any questions on this or comments, especially those who are in education?
You can continue. I think we'll just come back once you are done, just as soon as we have a sense of what is a complete presentation you have, and then we're going to come back.
Cool. Okay, so that's African schools in a nutshell. So a local public school in South Africa, now let's zoom into math, what a school offers in math. So if I go to any public school in South Africa, I'll get the GET, it's general education, something like that. Just grade 8 and 9, GET means basically it's grade 8 and 9. Math, whereas FET would be 10, 11, and 12. That's an easier way of separating those two. So everyone will do standard mathematics. All students take math, the same math in grade 8 and 9. Now there's something new, and I say new, Alex had the opportunity to start an AP program when I was still there, and the head of math, Dr. Emery, started leading that. And then I remember going to a conference in Cape Town. She wasn't able to attend, and then I attended. It was something Forbes, one of those insurance companies, and they were hosting this thing where for schools that are offering AP. And so immediately my eyes got open that I've been teaching at Alex at that point for 5 years. And then I got to realize that there's so many schools that are offering AP, what they call advanced placement. So for me, that was new in 2012, and I don't know how deep or how far that goes in the South African curriculum. So AP would be the foster kids, some provinces, they stream the kids. Alex does not stream, but this is for more advanced kids. So they would do the normal math, GET grade 8 to 9, and then the extra classes for AP. That's grade 8 to 9. Then you choose grade 10. Grade 10, you obviously have math literacy, which is considered the easier subject out of the two. But really, this is practical math, and I was heading this one up, and I really, for me, thought this was I learned a lot by just teaching that. Filling in your text forms, even though, I am a mathematician to some degree, math literacy allowed me to connect with mathematics a little bit more than just core math. So FET Mathematics, I think a number of schools, of course, and most kids, especially if the teachers are not qualified, they would push their kids to choose mathematical literacy. Of course, there's no problem with this per se if the child is not looking at studying the mathematics or a math-related course at university. However, if the child is, then there's a big problem. Then the other option between math literacy is math core, which used to be the hardest, I guess, form of mathematics. For those who are looking at engineering, accountancy, or even moving into the medical field. So a child choosing to go that route at university would definitely be math core. And then South Africa has been moving strongly towards AP mathematics, which is even the next level, harder than math core, and it exposes kids to probably to what we'll consider first year math. So the math that I did in my first year, to some degree, AP math students would be doing at a grade 12 level. So this is the trend with most things. This AP introduction in our curriculum has been important. By our curriculum in South African schools. Okay, so a normal mathematics core, we'll look at, these are kind of the 5 topics covered. We look at numbers, shapes in space and measurements, data handling and algebra. And then the degrees of that, of course, vary. Okay, I see there's some, hope that's not my network. All right, that's South Africa. I think I've painted the picture of South Africa. Please forgive me for always referring to Alex when I go back to the South African context. That's the school that I know and I taught in for many years. And so I use that as a picture of South Africa, even though that's not true. I mean, what percentage of our public school going students go to a formal model school? Very small. I don't know. I don't want the percentages. That could be 5 to 10%, I guess. The rest don't. So already, that's a specialized situation, and then even more when you're talking maybe an IEB school. Now let's talk about international schooling. So international schooling. So what I have over here, I just want you to, for a moment, to just look at I'm going to use Alex, I'm going to use the 2 other international schools I've taught at, the different missions of 3 different schools. And this might paint a good picture of the differences between the different schools, different curriculums, because it's whatever that mission is. So this is Alex, a good school. I would obviously any day send my child there. And okay, I see that, Tina. I'll hold on to that and maybe come back to your question. Okay. So we are looking at public schools in South Africa, and I'm just using, this is a small, I haven't looked, let's say, Elungisa, let's say, Edwesi, and see what their mission statement is. Or like a Zondelelo or whatever, a deck, where you went, and looking at what that mission of the school is, because I guess the mission and the vision, they drive where that school is going. So this one, maintain a happy, safe, stable family atmosphere through mutual dignity, ensure our members have a competitive edge in society. I guess that's our society. By our society, I mean in the South African context, offer relevant, challenging, and balanced education, create an environment in which all excellence and staff can reach their full potential, communicate with all partners, provide the best possible educational resources, encourage responsibility toward the community and the environment. So this is a mission statement of a very good school in the South African context. And so now that I'm sitting as an international teacher, I can almost say that this is quite, would I say, really, it's really focused and it's really limited without offending. Loretto, I see your question. I'll respond at some point. So this is limited only because I've been exposed to sort of different things. In the context of being in South Africa in a good school, it is not. Because the focus here, remember when I spoke about the NCS, is focused on the South African perspective. Whereas maybe an IB school will be looking a little bit broader and not just our society, to be looking at a global society. So let's look at different things. This is Chingwa. Chingwa is an international school's mission is to foster creative, critical thinkers who are rooted in China and prepared to lead in the global community. Very short. And you already see, okay, there's the idea of critical thinkers. Remember, I did mention that Chingwa itself are the top kids in China. And so the kids are rooted in their culture, their Chinese identity. And then they are being prepared to go and lead globally. So then they have an influx of international teachers that not only teach an international curriculum, but they themselves are international, which means the children's minds are opened up a little bit more. And if I come to China with my kids who are South African, they already bring their own mixture to the environment. And so those different cultures, you have one from Ukraine, you have Zimbabwe, you have the US, you have the UK, you have Brazil, you have all these things being mixed together. And so the child, even though they might be in China or even Chinese, their perception about the world changes immediately. This is my current school, Amerasia. QAIS or Amerasia aims to inspire a lifelong love of learning, a holistic, child-centered, inquiry-based approach by embracing each students' diverse needs, learning styles, and strengths. We strive to develop courageous, is the word, global citizens who help to create a more peaceful world through community action, intercultural understanding, and respect for life. So if we have to take a step back and say, what are some of the differences? Well, these different systems would have a different output, right? They are creating or developing a different type of student. A public school system is reproducing people that would fit into that culture, or into that society. An international one is trying to foster kids that can fit in any environment. And so if we take it from that perspective, already we can see there's a huge difference between public school system in the South African context. And I have to say, by the way, any public school system, not just South Africa, if you look at the Zimbabwe, if you look at the US, if you look at Chinese, it is creating students or fostering a student that will best serve the needs of that country. That's an important thing. All right, so I keep on checking questions as I'm going. Olwam, I don't know if I should maybe. I have two questions.
Don't worry about the questions. We are noting all the questions that are coming in. We just want you to complete the presentation, and then we're going to go to the questions, because I think I understand Tina's and Kolotle's questions and the need that they might actually be looking at when they ask those questions.
Okay.
So just continue maybe till the end of your presentation in the next 10 minutes, then we can actually entertain the questions.
Cool. Noted. Okay, so international curriculums. Quite interesting, because I've already touched on the idea of what a public schooling curriculum does. It is to foster the student to serve that society. So in the international realm, we have different curriculums. So there are various curriculums followed by various international schools all over, even in South Africa. There are many international schools in South Africa. Now, I did not know about international schools in South Africa until I went abroad. And then I realized, but wait, South Africa has a lot of international schools. And those are the type of schools, I guess, if I were to come back at this point, I would personally want to go and continue teaching in. Not that I have anything against the schools I've taught at before, but I think I would want to continue in this trajectory that I've started on. Okay, now something to note, if a school's name mentions the country's name, French International School of Johannesburg, like there's the international school, there's the American International School of Johannesburg, which in Africa, in terms of international schools, and there are many international schools in Africa, I think it's top 3 rated by teachers I have worked there. But here's the word American. So immediately you would think it follows the American curriculum. And by following the American curriculum, then those kids who are there are being molded to go and fit and gel well in the American context, which is true to some degree. So here, for instance, you might have an Italian international school where everything will be taught in Italian. So these are kids that maybe their parents are working for the embassies or companies that are international. So their parents want the kids to go back to Italy, or a Korean international school. But by far, schools don't necessarily mention a country. They are just whatever international school. And it's important then to look into what curriculum that school offers. Okay, and it's not just what curriculum they offer, it's how well they offer it. That's probably more important than what they offer. So probably the top 3 in the international school realm, like there's a Canadian international school, which personally, let's say I would not consider going and working, even though I'm sure it's okay. There are schools that follow the Australian curriculum. These that I have here by far the most prevalent of all. We have British schools, so schools that follow the IGCSE. IGCSE is middle school. Okay, by middle school, I mean up until, in that case, up until grade 10. Okay, up until grade 10. And then from grade 11 and 12, it's either you're doing AS levels or A levels. AS levels, if I can use the word standard and higher level. So AS level is kind of like a standard, okay? And then you can get an AS certificate. And A levels is higher level. So it demands a little bit more. And the I stands for international. So that's, I'll go into that later. And then you have the IB. The IB is not really a curriculum, but more of a framework, okay? It's more of a framework, even though I said in independent curriculum, it is actually more of a framework that different schools use and fill in their own curriculums within. That's where I'm at. I'm at the IB school currently. In Chingwa, it was a Common Core and AP school. Common Core is a set of standards established by the US state, and the goal is to prepare US students to enter US universities. They also have what they call the Advanced Placement, AP as well. So the first AP I've ever heard was from the American. It's not quite the same as the SAAP. Okay, so these are the three that we'll be looking at when we are thinking international. So let's look at the Cambridge, IGCSE and AS and A levels. So the Cambridge IGCSE, as I said, is grade 6 to grade 10. So that's those 5 years, okay? So in that case, that's the middle school. So these are the topics in mathematics that we cover. Numbers, algebra and graphs and coordinate geometry and all those things. By the way, you can have access to this once we're done. Vectors and transformations are quite an interesting thing. For me, I did math core. Well, we had higher grade, yes, high grade, so I did high grade math. And vectors were mainly done in science, physical science, and not so much in mathematics then. So there are certain topics that you realize, or the depth of those topics that you begin to realize, that in the normal, let's say math, even in the math core, they are not quite covered, or the depth of them are not covered to the degree that these international schools do. The Cambridge IGCSE has 2 levels, it's called core and it's called extended. Okay, core is what we'll call standard, and extended is your higher level. So there's a differentiation. So a child who's more gifted will obviously take the extended route or route, and a child who just wants to do math will take the core. That's middle school in the essence of up to grade 10. So what's the difference between Cambridge, the AS and the A level in terms of mathematics? Well, there's 6 different papers that one could take. So if you're doing AS level, you would choose 2 of the papers, like paper 1 or 2 or 1 or 4, or 1 and 5. So only 2. It's not so heavy on you. Whereas if you're doing A levels are probably the highest level, okay, the hardest. And you're doing 4 papers, and it's a combination of 1, 3, 4. Not that you should care about this, but you see that there's a differentiation, that you are covering more topics in the same amount of time. So it requires a student who's more diligent. And for A levels, you choose 3 subjects, right? By 3 subjects, I mean, this is just for mathematics. Maybe I could do A levels in English and A levels in literature, or whatever the case might be. So that then will get you your grade 12 certificate in the Cambridge system. So a number of schools and independent and private schools in South Africa offer the Cambridge system. And that's something to think about. Then that means when that child writes the grade 12, in essence, they've obtained a certificate that allows them access to a UK university. That's you could be paid. VIB, International Baccalaureate. And now I don't mean to be biased or whatever. This is what I and many educators that I've taught in many different systems, they consider the IB to be the best curriculum in the world, or framework. I'm not confusing those, but there's a reason why we sometimes call it a curriculum, because in grade 12, it does mean that. So IB has 4 parts to it, and the diploma program is what we deem to be the best grade 11 and 12 program in the world when it comes to preparing students for university. So students that go through the diploma program, so in the British system, it's the A levels or AS levels, that's 2 years, 11 and 12. For the diploma program, It's also grade 11 and 12. It's a 2-year course. But this one is considered the best in the world when it comes to preparing kids for university. As a math teacher, there's 2 math subjects, analysis and approaches, and interpretations and applications. They each have standard level and higher level. So most schools would offer analysis and approaches SL, HL, and interpretations and applications SL. HL is probably the hardest one out of these 4 subjects. Middle school, then you have 2 courses. We have 7 minutes. So let me move a little bit faster. So what makes it DP in itself? What makes it so unique? The center, like any other curriculum, will say the center is the student, and they have what they call approaches to learning, ETL skills that you teach the kids. And then you have these 3 things here, which most curriculums don't have. An extended essay, any English teachers would love this aspect. 4,000 essay, each child chooses to write on any topic based on any of the subjects. And these are the subjects offered over there. TOK, which is quite an interesting addition. And then you can make something creative, an activity or a service. And then, of course, we have the 6 subjects. So what makes this quite unique, I would say for me, is this ring, with, of course, the student in the center. So DP, these are the topics covered. This is for the applications, interpretations, and these are the recommended hours for the analysis and approaches. So you would notice that calculus, for instance, at an HL level is 41 hours of teaching, whereas here is 55 hours. So the focus between these, you still teach the same thing, just you don't go so much in depth and different times. The biggest focus here is statistics and probability. And so this is what really makes this very challenging, because this is a more practical, this is more core. So kids who are going to engineering, we choose like it's math core, and kids who are going more social sciences, we choose the applications. All right, and then Common Core, the last one, probably the most complicated, because it's all separated. All the other curriculums are integrated, so but this one is separated. So high school starts in grade 9 in American school, and then grade 9, 10, 11. So you only need 3, we call them credits, 3 math courses in the American system. You only need 3. But for kids who are advanced, they would have already done this in middle school, or even both in middle school. So by the time they get to high school, they could just start with Algebra 2 and then progress to harder mathematics. Okay, these are the higher order, pre-calculus, calculus, and stats. I'll explain what that AP means in this context. So there are 3 AP math courses you could take if you go to the American roots. For math, there's AP in everything, of course. Okay, Olam, yes.
Okay, I'm looking at time now because we left with like 30 minutes before we conclude the presentation. And I like what I heard as a basis maybe for the differing curriculum in math education. When you start from the mission statement, I think we are more focusing on community and living well with each other and all of that. And then you've made a point that from the Chinese perspective, I suppose, or the international perspective, there's a more focus on internationalization, and being more culturally aware and taking part in the global space. So I liked hearing that. And then I think let me just bring in Ulanugu Utina to just pose that question. You can pose the question, Tina, but you wanted to know more about what was his research topic for postgrad, which is honors in your master's. And you wanted to ask something about the language and the math, especially as it relates to South African context. Maybe let me just ask Tina to just pose that question as well.
Thanks, Olwan. I actually typed it in because I didn't want to speak, but it's okay. Lwazi, thanks for your presentation. I think my question was around your research interest in just the maths education space. I just wanted you to share that with us. And then the second one was around your take on language in mathematics, especially in a context like South Africa, where we are multilingual. And one of the challenges that I've seen in the classroom is that we haven't quite found a way to grapple with that reality in South Africa, especially in well, I can't even say in previously disadvantaged schools, but rather both in the schooling level, also in the higher education space. Language keeps on popping up as a challenge for majority of kids who attend the 95% of the schools you mentioned. Yeah, so I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Okay. Thank you for that.
The second question was really from Ulerato Kolohle, who had to step out a bit, but he did ask me to pose the question. With your exposure to international standards, how could we fix the math problem in South Africa, where most learners in grade 9 are condoned to the next grade in mathematics when they get 20%?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I can see the questions. Yeah. Okay.
You can
cool.
answer.
Yeah. I'll start with Tina's one. Tina, in terms of my research topics in postgrad, I think for honors, because I was teaching at Alex, I was at that point, and now I don't say this as an advocate for what I support equity or equality of access to education. For honors, it was not related to what I did for masters. Honors, I was really interested in a PE context because I don't know where everyone is from. I was interested in the former model C schools on the admissions policy. And so I did some reading on the admissions policy and what the governing bodies, of course, they play a big role in that, and looking at the Act, the South African Governing Body Act and admissions policy. And then looking at that and saying, and then I took the data of course, now schools weren't always forthcoming, and I asked for the breakdown of all the different genders and races. My concern was looking at the races and the genders in the school and the intakes year in, year out, and trying to use the data to come up with the conclusion whether the admissions policy was discriminatory against race, in the case of gender and race. So that was my honors one, which was okay. I got to speak to all the principals of all the schools, former model C schools, and they were quite interested in that, and they supported that. And then my master's was a bit different because I was already in the classroom and I've been teaching for some years, and I taught both math and computers. It just broke my heart year in, year out, where I would see the math pass rates or the dropping, especially let's say in a place like the Eastern Cape, where Western Cape and Johannesburg always led to a large degree. So I was interested in in seeing if I could use computers, because with the computer science degree, I fell in love with Excel at that point. I was not fully aware of other mathematical programs, so Excel was the easiest one because all the kids had access. Excuse the play on words. They had access to Excel, and so using technology to help the kids with understanding mathematics and seeing if that would, firstly, if they enjoy it, and to see their motivation in mathematics will change. So that was the biggest thing on my master's. And so in terms of language, now I want to answer the second part. What's my take on language and mathematics? I want to say from the onset that in all the schools I've taught, well, internationally, only 2, but all the people I've spoken to that have come especially from the US has a big Mexican or Spanish or Latino community. Those seem to struggle with the language of English because they come speaking Spanish. And so there's a big drive even from countries like that to support the language acquisition for those kids, because it's a 2-level challenge. There's a language challenge, and then there's the abstractness of mathematics. So if the language is not there, even if you might be brilliant, you would not perform well in mathematics. And so all these countries that have this situation, China does not, because everyone speaks Mandarin, but the moment they come to international school where I'm teaching in English, and let's say they just came straight from a Chinese school, most of the schools have dedicated language acquisition teachers and classes where they take the struggling kids in the language and they do an accelerated program with them. And that counters, that helps them. Of course, you give them a year or 2, and then they're fully integrated. And so the language of English is no longer a problem. So that's one solution, which is an expensive solution because you need the resources and you need the extra people. And in a non-fee paying schools, it's hard to do that. But if you're talking about quintile 4 and 5, the ones that should be there, high school fees, they could afford, I guess, to hire those specialist language trainers. I'm not talking about a teacher who's teaching English per se, but a teacher who immerses the kids in the language of all the subjects that they'll be learning. So that's a one take. In South Africa, a lot of things that we spoke about was the whole code switching. And that's a big benefit, of course, that if we are teaching in a school, like if I taught at a TOSA school, even though in high school we need to be teaching in English, and one can speak both Xhosa and English or Zulu and English, it is important to code switch for the sake of allowing the kids to understand. And then there's a lot of repetition saying, now that you understand it, now say it back, for instance, to me in English, so that they practice the language of English as well after they've obtained the concepts. So that's my take on that, and I hope it answers you satisfactorily.
On the same question of language, you just said that you teach them in the language that they understand, and then you ask them to repeat in English so that they can show that they understand.
No, yes. So what it is that the papers that they will write will be given in English. So if I code switch, if I move between Xhosa and English, when they don't understand something I'm saying in English, it's okay for me to say it in Xhosa and to use any context that they can understand that is close to them. Once they've understood it, I still expect them to be able then to say it in English. So even if I give them the words, or I would do something like a group thing where I say, okay, ask the friend next to you to explain, say that to them in your language, allow them to translate what you've said, and then say it back to me. Because at the end of the day, they must be able, and that's the expectation. Not only do they need to understand the concepts of math, they need to be understanding the concepts of math in the language of instruction, which is English. So you don't want them to just understand math. You want them also to continue to build the vocabulary, the language vocabulary, which is in English as well. So then that's where that interaction is. I hope that makes sense.
When does language become a barrier, and when does the cognitive abilities and strengths become the issue? Are you able as an educator to see this is a language question and they can't understand English, or this is a competence level of this particular child? And I'm asking this because I need you to, I've had friends that are Chinese and at varsity, and I realized that they understood math at an extraordinary level. Maybe the people that were able to make it to our universities understood math at an extraordinary level, but they couldn't speak a word in English. So when does it become, can you tell if as a teacher that at this particular level of math education, at this particular level, we look at the language, and at the other levels, we look at the actual development of the brain?
Yeah. Again, you know, the challenge in the South African context is resources. Now, by that I mean, in a ideal situation, you would have a learning specialist. And not only that, as a child is admitted to the school, they will do a language test where you check the reading, writing, hearing, listening, whatever the case might be, where you can ascertain where the child is in terms of the language of instruction for that particular school. Now, in the math classroom, in this context, we already have kids that come where we know the level of language they're in. So if I'm sitting down with the student, and let's say I say, what is 10 times 2? And the child can work it out easily. The moment then I bring in the idea of a context, and I say I had 10 friends who were sitting here, and each of them had 2 apples. So how many apples were there? So now I've taken the same idea and I guess, put it in a context. And so you would then notice that the child was able to perform the procedural aspect of just saying 10 times 2, and they gave you an answer. But now they get stuck in the context of deciphering what the language is saying. Even if I don't write the words 10 and 2, I write it in words instead of numbers. That's where you are able to pick up. The child knows the procedural aspect of this, how to do this multiplication, but this is where they are struggling. And so what we as educators, and this has grown more and more in the international, that we've been forced not only to be math teachers, but to be language teachers. And so a large part of our time is spent on going through the meaning of words, the meaning of this and what this means, and then would allow them to talk among themselves in the language, in Chinese, and then we'll say, translate that in English, so that they get to understand the word in its holistic. So when I apply it in the problem, there are no questions. Yeah, so you can definitely just do.
What was your preparation like?
You're breaking there.
What was your preparation like? What was your preparation like coming as a South African who do not speak Mandarin or any of their indigenous languages, who had to instruct a technical subject like math? And can you learn anything from that preparation into how we understand and how we teach math in South Africa?
Yeah, I think, of course, you know, sometimes there's a disconnect between what we do at a university and what we do in a classroom. You know, and by disconnect, I mentioned the idea of code switching, and we did it. And there's a lot of research in South Africa about language challenges and math. But it was only when I came here, actually even in my second school, because in my first international school, there was a whole department of what they call ESL teachers. Here, It's a very small department. So we've been drilled to take language seriously. And so they say, before you are a math teacher, you're a language teacher. That's almost the motto at our school. And so I have now learned to respect and to understand that the kids that I teach are Chinese. Some of them don't even, the only English they get is the English they get at school. And the parents expect these kids by the time they finish to be almost, at a level, first language speaker level of English. And so everything about the school then focuses on building that child's English level. Because if they don't get the language, it doesn't matter what else you teach. Physics, math, humanities, history, geography, they won't get anything because they don't understand the language. So resources need to be put on helping the kids understand the language to the point that it needs to be almost a separate department that pulls kids out, works on their language acquisition until they're competent enough, because they will struggle in every subject.
But
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to also bring you in, Tina, because your background, you were lecturing, according to my sources, you were lecturing at Rhodes University statistics up until a month ago or so. But you can ask a question, and I wanted you to breathe into this question of language and how you are able to teach, to instruct. Let me just use that term, to instruct in a way that the learners understand.
Sure. I just wanted I'm having my brain is buzzing while Lwazi is speaking. I guess the first question I had is around whether he has any plans to come back in the country, because I really think that we just need the manpower. That's number one. So that's just posing that out there, whether he is planning to come back and teach in the South African context. And then he made a mention around the issue of, before we are maths teachers, we are language teachers. And it's such a difficult one, because I think it depends on how one positions themselves. Personally, I don't see myself as an English teacher when I teach mathematics or statistics, because I really feel like, mathematics on its own is a language. So now for me to be expected to be also an English teacher is a very difficult one. But rather I see my role as one in which I need to look at, the concepts that are taught in mathematics, and how do I break them down so that they're accessible to my students, whether their English vocabulary is, massive or not, right? And this is coming from, someone, for me, my biggest battle at university is the whole thing of having lack of transformation when it comes to the staff members that we have at, different universities, different schools, which then poses the challenge of, we won't have Lwazi, who has an experience of being isiXhosa speaking, but teaching in English. So the likelihood that you understand Utina, who comes from a Motherwell, and the kinds of challenges that she's going to experience at UCT, it's going to be very difficult, right? So my question is around the issue of your honors, what do you call this, paper, in terms of what was it that you basically, I mean, we know the admission problem in SA, especially when it comes to former Model C schools, and how, discriminating it is. I don't know what your findings were in terms of, did you find that it is discriminating, or did you find that, it is inclusive? Because personally, from my own personal experience, when I was applying for schools for my little sister, we struggled to get her into schools because she was not coming from feeder schools, number one. And number two, she was not living in the area. So like, for example, your former school, Alex, we applied to it, but because we don't live in the area, she struggled to get into that school. So if then we are having a challenge of getting certain kids into these schools, and the lack of transformation that exists in terms of the who teachers, how do you foresee South Africa taking the challenges we are grappling with in the education space forward, if we're having still those kinds of issues, which is admissions, lack of transformation when it comes to, you know, who is teaching, who is the knower in the school? Because I don't think if we're having a former Medal C school that, you know, has, you know, only white teachers, that we're going to get what we need to get out of, you know, out of the kids that we are teaching. That's something that I'm throwing out there in terms of the admission transformation, but also who are we teaching and how do we then utilize the people we have to gain access in terms of you know, getting the kids where they need to be at, because we have a huge challenge, especially in the mathematics curriculum.
Yeah.
Can you just also take, there's a hand up of a P10, P20 light.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lucanyo. I'm a teacher, but I'm also a master's student at Nelson Mandela University. You know, the topic for my dissertation is exactly what is being discussed, especially around the issue of language, because I'm looking at teaching strategies needed by maths teachers in order to support English second language learners in the context of mathematics grade 9 classrooms. You know, with any subject, any knowledge is only transferred through language. Yeah. So language becomes a central point in whatever subject that we're teaching. Yes, I understand that there's mathematical language. However, before you get to the maths language, you need basic interpersonal communication skills in English that are going to be built on in order to build academic language proficiency in a particular language that is being used for learning and teaching. So that issue that says maths teachers are first language teachers, it kind of, you know, makes sense in a sense that you cannot even transfer that maths knowledge without language. Yeah. And so language becomes this vehicle that you need in order for you to be able to get the knowledge across. And notice I'm not saying English, I'm saying language. Yeah. I'm saying language is what is needed. And in the context of South Africa, we are in South African classrooms are multilingual classrooms. Former Model C schools don't seem to realize that South African classrooms are multilingual. And we need to use the repertoire we need to use the language resource that learners bring into the classroom as a resource instead of it being seen as a hindrance. And so teachers need to be able to make themselves vulnerable to a point where, okay, I do realize that I'm supposed to be teaching in English. However, how do you understand this in your own language? So that the kids are then going to be able to try and make meaning of maths and mathematics, and not take indigenous languages to the periphery of only to the period Yesxhosa, Alex, or only the period of Xhosa but bring those languages as resources within classrooms. Part of the challenge that we have in South Africa is the issue of language policy. Because if we're looking at the language in education policy in South Africa, it gives the right of SGBs to choose the language of learning and teaching within a particular school. I did my teaching practice in Germany. And in Germany, even if you're coming from outside, you're going to learn everything in German. Because they see value in using their indigenous home language in the pursuit of knowledge in whatever subject. And so we see in South Africa, because we see English as this, super language that supersedes all other languages, and only English and Afrikaans have been developed into academic languages, we seem to think that our own African languages are not up to scratch and they can't be developed into academic languages. But be that as it may, I think for now, I think for now, it's very difficult for us to be able to develop develop our own indigenous academic languages indigenous languages as academic languages, because of the past, where we come from as South Africa, where they are just seen as not good enough. So the value of home language teaching, the value of using indigenous languages, a language that a child goes home to, is brought into the classroom in order for us to be able to assist learners in making better meaning of maths. The sooner, I think, the sooner we realize that home language education in maths classrooms is the way to go, the better. Because in China, they teach in Mandarin. China, they teach in Mandarin. What is stopping us, or what is stopping South Africans to say, okay, grade R to 3, they are using their own home languages to learn maths. And then all of a sudden, from grade 4 onwards, there's a complete switch and immersion into English. And in that whole process of changing into English, we're leaving so many behind because they don't understand the language. And here's a challenge. Maybe I'm going to challenge.
Before the challenge, Lukhanyo, because I know we're out of time, but I feel like we can still sort of tease out this last bit of the conversation. I want to ask, as somebody who's not in math, is the South African problem the curriculum innovation, or is it the process of instruction and educating that causes us to actually to have bad mathematics results? And I'm using bad mathematics results knowing what our rates are at the matric level, which is what is in our eyes every year. But is that even the right way of measuring how good or how bad our system is? So my question is really, I would like for maybe Lukhanyo to just conclude and answer that, and also Tina to sort of reflect on that before Lwazi to respond on that.
Tina, you can go first. Sorry, guys. I just came in there with. sorry.
No, it's okay. I think, I don't know. I can't speak because I can't speak on behalf of all maths teachers, obviously. But I think the South African issue, in my opinion, is an instruction issue. It's how we deliver, how teaching is delivered. Mathematics teaching is delivered at schooling level. So one of the problems that you'll realize is that when we meet some of these students at university level, is that they manage to do what Lwazi was talking about, which is manipulating equations at a very low level, the level that doesn't require understanding of mathematics, right? So it's more around, can I solve for X? But when you take a step back and ask the student, what does it mean to solve for X? What are you actually doing? Then you realize that there's gaps in terms of their knowledge and their understanding and, just appreciation of the subject itself. So I think our problems in mathematics, they go back to, who is teaching in majority of our schools, and how those people were trained, especially in the era of apartheid, Abantu education, etc., etc. There was an interesting study that was done where, teachers in KZN, I think, were given a grade 10 test. These are teachers who teach grade 12. and they were given a grade 10 test, and some of them couldn't do well in that test, right? So for me, I think we've got a systematic issue of how teachers are trained, and also how delivery is then done, and also a lack of, I think we're repeating ourselves in terms of if I was taught in a particular way, I'll see that as the way of teaching. And then when I teach, I'll teach in that particular way. So I think there's an innovation, or rather there is a rethinking that we need to do in terms of delivery of knowledge, especially around issues like mathematics, in terms of how do you make mathematics not just this abstract thing that students think it's about solving for X, and they never are able to link mathematics with their lived experiences at home. So that's the big issue in my opinion. It's the delivery. And I love the last person's point around, because I was feeling that, I don't know, for me, the whole point of going back to English is something that I basically struggled quite a lot with in the university space, higher education space, which is having to always go back to English as a sort of like a the pedestal, the thing that's sitting on the pedestal, that whatever we're doing here, we can use this Xhosa as sort of like this as a tool to integrate the students into understanding mathematics, but at the end of the day, they need to be assessed in this Xhosa, and that's, you start in English, and that's something that I think we need to sort of debate, or rather look at very closely, in terms of, is that the way South Africa should be going? Yes, we want global students who are able to then integrate into other countries, etc. But the question is, our own language is not powerful enough for us to teach students in them in such a way that when they go to China one day, they're able to have the full foundation of mathematics. And they won't battle much with mathematical concepts in another country, but rather the language that is spoken in that country only. So yeah, I'm hoping that I answered what you were asking, Olam.
Yes, Ulukanya, are you ready to add your bit?
Yeah, I'll try and make it.
Yes, maybe the question I was asking, maybe let me try and put it this way, because now the economy that we have is actually governed and ran in English. It's an English economy. Whenever you are a learned person, you will probably have to go and work in the language of the economy, which is largely English. And I'm thinking of a child that is learning as well in isiXhosa, that then needs to go and practice in the space station. What is it? SKA, space station that we have. They probably will have to practice in English as well. But do they have the right kind of mathematical tools, curriculum, in order for them to practice at that level, at the international level? Or that is not our worries? Our worries are probably that we have the right curriculum, we just don't have the way of teaching it successfully to the kids. Because for me, those are two different questions, and the approaches can be different. So we then don't have to worry about what Lwazi is learning in China, because we're all doing the same thing. They just are good at delivering it to their kids in their language than we are at delivering it to our kids. I hope that to some extent sort of brings us to some kind of a finality as to what the problem is. We haven't even answered the problem. We just want to know if the problem is the same for all of us.
Let me try and be short. The South African curriculum, because the only other curriculums that are mathematics curricula that I know outside of South Africa. It's the Kenyan and that I've interacted with. It's the Kenyan and the German maths curriculum. Now, if you're looking at those two, the South African maths curriculum is very comparable. It's comparable in a sense that it's almost at the same standard as the one in Germany, because I sat for close to 3 months studying the maths education, the maths curriculum specifically for grades 4, 5, and 6 in Germany. And if you're looking at those particular grades, it's very comparable to what is being taught in South Africa. So the CAPS curriculum in itself, okay, there are certain instances or certain parts within the CAPS curriculum which could be better developed and which could be better enhanced. But by and large, it's okay. So which means if the actual content of the curriculum is comparable, then the problem must lie in the way that we're bringing across this maths education. So it comes to issues of instruction, issues of pedagogy and didactics, issues as to how part in which we teach mathematics. And I want to agree with Tina in a sense that perhaps the way in which maths educators are being trained in South Africa is not what it's supposed to be. It's not what it's supposed to be. In a sense, Lwazi said, I went through the same thing at NMU. I did the maths that I did. We spent so much time doing calculus. Something which is far removed from what we're going to be teaching in high school. High school, you're going to be teaching trig, which is not done in university. We spend so much Euclidean geometry, which is hardly done in university, and so the how we train our teachers is very, very important. So the way in which we instruct. So I'm going to answer this finally and say, perhaps the curriculum is fine, but it's the how we bring that curriculum to the learners, and how we bring maths education to the learners, because we make it seem as if this is this thing which is out of this world, which is unattainable, which is just meant for the few, and it's not meant to be like that. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Lwazi. You have the final remarks, but in your remarks, is there something fundamentally different in China, in math education in China, than what you've been exposed to, and I guess at Nelson Mandela University and Alex, because those were the institutions that you spend most of your time in South Africa?
Something that I think I didn't bring through is the idea of culture. We often think that Chinese are very good at math. Some of you might know that actually South Koreans are probably better at math than Chinese. And when I say better, I mean the culture of these Far East countries is such that the whole family is centered around that one child. So every possible resource is given to that. We have so many things. Our country, poverty levels, we have 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. In China, you have by far still the one child. I mean, I know it's been changed, but most families have one child. And you have grandparents staying in the house with the in-laws staying with mom and dad. So that's 4 adults to 1. So they devote everything to that one child. And the system is very rigorous. The level of all teachers is a master's level. So teachers, even though they get peanuts, by peanuts, I mean, as it says, no profit is without honor, except in their own country, or whatever, something along those lines. They are not well, they are respected, but they're not well paid, but you need still a master's level. So the teacher's level and the training themselves is quite deep, and they do teach the way that they've been taught. And for them, it's about depth of mathematics and not the broadness or the beauty of mathematics. And so a lot of the Chinese kids are even similar to the South Korean kids, is that these kids start attending extra classes from the age of 3 or 4. So by the time they are getting to what you should be teaching them, let's say in grade 5, they learn that through the extra class teachers at grade 2. So in that case, they are able to go, it seems, to go further and deeper than most other curriculums. And it's all about competition. So we cannot change the culture. And I think, in essence, that would have been one of my conclusions, is the idea of culture. South Africa has a certain culture. Every country has a certain culture. It's not going to take a year to change that. It might not even take certain policies. It takes a whole lot of things to change that culture. The biggest influence to a child's education is dependent on the parents. And I think I've realized that more now that I've been away from my family in South Africa and just being me and my wife and 2 kids here, that if we as parents don't do the extra and spend time, or even my son is 5 and is attending 4 different classes outside. And my daughter, who's 3, is already attending an extra class in dancing, but not in math. And only because that's what the culture is here, that it's about competition. It's about your child being the best of the best in everything. So my child could be excellent in South Africa, but the moment they come here, they would struggle because the children are 2 to 3 years more ahead. So culture for me is a major thing. And I think with both what the 2 previous guys spoke, delivery, I would definitely, the way I would present topics now, because I've been exposed to the international ways, it's opened my mind to in such a way that I would change the way I taught or I teach math and even the tools I use to teach. And of course, money. Money is an important one. So I hope, Olam, that answers you. And that sort of concludes my talk.
Very much, for attending. It's truly been an eye-opener, I suppose, because, you know, families are struggling with this thing called math. It's the biggest scarecrow at school, and the young ones, again, to these triggered parents who couldn't do well in math. We expect this family again to sort of teach and edify and develop this child. We are just going down the stream, we're just going deep that we are not coming out. And I guess this thing about culture, for me, it's important because I can see I am married. I have 1 child who's also 3 years old, the same size as Olanduka or as Lwazi. But I've realized that our availability to teach and converse with her, both the father and the mother, of course, are postgrad level human beings and professionals. The child sort of functions a lot more better than the cousins, say who might not be in that privileged position. And I'm not talking about just other strength. I'm just talking about math now. I'm just talking about numbers. I'm just talking about being able to reason. We take the same child and then we compare now with people about say Qingdao is unfortunate. Let's say this uneven environment. What would it take to actually make it even? Is it supposed to be even? Are we supposed to just look into Sibale education in the country? The more you just grow gray hair, and the more you even you are an outlier. I really, for some reason, I would like to continue hosting the difficult conversations. We will also take time in getting to the center and getting to solutions. But I think as a space, it would be great to be able to host the difficult conversation that we might not have with the friends, with the family. We must really, at some stage, I would like to have an astronaut to come and actually have a conversation with us and find ways and pathways. How do we drive people and our own children to actually go there? So if it was possible, I would have a longer period and a much more, a physical engagement around these things, because we really have to learn from each other. At the same time, we have to pose these solutions, because solutions. No one is going to come and teach us how to actually do it right, because we've seen that our elders are not going to be successful in this question. Statistics, math, science, the STEM subjects actually need us to just go in with all the the abilities that we have, and pick our people, because we also need to protect families and all of that. So opportunity and resources is a question. Thank you again, everyone. I thank you to Lukang and Notina, who just came in also to edify us and to sort of engage Lwazi. I was actually fearing that Lwazi will come and I will not be able to sort of understand so much of what he would say. Maybe next time we should look into the curriculum specifically, so that we know what is different as well, what is not, in order to be better. Apologies for going past the time. I just couldn't let it go at that time. And thank you, Lwazi, once again. Hopefully we're gonna have you again, maybe sometime next year. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Lwazi.
Bye. Thank you, my brother.
Mr. Zat, it was informative. I will check you. I will call you just now. All right.
I'm good. I was still reading just to see if I'm sorry, man. I was just reading just to see if I missed something. I'm good. So I'm sorry I couldn't allow you to talk to your friend. but we should be able to talk to each other. He was actually having a difficult dialogue here.
Yes, we'll talk offline just now.